Hello everyone, I am the Commander Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews under the deck text. On this episode of the Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a new commander from Edge of Eternity's Hearthhull, the Worldseed. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck text, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with a logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Hearthhull is a 6/7 legendary spacecraft with station for 1 generic, 1 black, 1 red, and 1 green. Now, you might be wondering why this can be your commander if it's not a legendary creature and doesn't have the can be your commander clause like Shurikai does. That's because, as Edge of Eternity's, legendary vehicles and legendary spacecraft with a printed power toughness box can be your commander as an updated rule to the commander format. I have my feelings about this rule, but this isn't the video or media for that. Let's just say I'm not excited for it, since it now fundamentally changed what I can include in my commander cube due to how I curate it. In any case, since Hearthhull has a printed power toughness box and is a legendary spaceship, it can be your commander. Thanks to Station, you can tap creatures with a total power of at least 2 to give it its first activated ability, allowing you to pay 1 and tap it to sacrifice a land and draw 2 cards to play an extra land that turn. That's already a pretty strong ability in those colors, since so many cards have triggers when lands leave the battlefield or are sacrificed, as well as landfall, since you could play an extra land. If you station creatures with at least 8 power, you now have access to its creature form, where it now has flying, vigilance, and haste. Being a 6/7, this is nothing to scoff at. Even with just a single point of power boost, it's now a 3-turn clock. However, it also gains a triggered ability that hits all opponents for 2 life each time you sacrifice a land. This is the ability that I built this deck around, making the most of lands entering and leaving the battlefield, especially because we already have a sacrifice outlet and payoff in the command zone. Naturally, decks that care about lands are very rewarding to build around, since you need to be playing lands anyways, so you can have a ton of synergy just for playing the game. However, you can make it even more synergistic. For example, I already run fetch lands in all of my decks, but with Hearthhull, running them is further rewarded. So much so that the ones I'm running here are the slow ones, with the exception of Prismatic Vista. That one's actually pretty good. It might seem odd to not run the modern and legacy staple fetch lands because they can get lands with multiple types, especially in a 3-color deck like this one. But that's because I'm also running Root Path Purifier. Thanks to all of my lands having the basic subtype, I can chain fetch lands into other fetch lands once I have my other payoffs in play. Granted, some of these lands enter tapped, but the deck is also running Horizon Explorer for that, which not only does this have our lands enter untapped, but it creates lander tokens, which are essentially Wayfarer baubles, furthering the engine. Once you have both of these creatures in play, one fetch land gets every other fetch land in your library, and that last fetch land can get whatever land you want. And in any case, you can still make the most of these fetch lands to color fix, as well as thin the deck of lands. In any case, the deck is also running both Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth and Yavimaya Cradle of Growth for color fixing anyways. So once there's nothing left to fetch for, those fetch lands that can't tap for mana can now do so. Chromatic Lantern is also included to help us not get color screwed, as well as giving our fetch lands something else to do. Plus, it also taps for mana, giving us mana acceleration. Don't worry, it's the only mana rock in the deck along with Soul Ring, but it is very useful here, so it was worth running. Also, something worth mentioning with Root Path Purifier is how it interacts with Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon. I'm running neither in this deck because it's bracket 2, and including these will raise it higher than that. But the deck is already running 15 snow-covered basics, 5 of each type, so it's not really affected by these. Worst that can happen is our fetch lands tapping for red. Oh no. But with Root Path Purifier, since all your lands are basic, they're not hit by these effects, while you can still hinder opponents with greedy mana bases. So that's also something to consider with a deck like this one. Keep in mind that you can also just sacrifice away those affected lands for value anyways. In any case, being chaining fetch lands like that or not, they're still great for the landfall effects in the deck, which is why I'm also running all these bounce lands in it. Apart from the lair, they tap for 2 mana, albeit entering tapped, but if you control Horizon Explorer, they'll enter untapped. Bouncing a land is okay because the deck is running other effects that allow us to play extra lands apart from our commander. Right off the bat, there's Exploration, Exploration Broodship, Druid Class, Azusa Lost But Seeking, Dryada of the Elysian Grove, Loot Exuberant Explorer, Zeldinge, and Mina, and then Wildborn and the Gitrog Monster. Granted, you need to have the Exploration Broodship properly stationed to get the effect, as well as having Druid Class in the appropriate level. but they're so cheap to cast that you'll easily get there. Some of these also provide other beneficial effects like the Dryad, allowing our lands to tap for any color, Loot providing a form of card advantage, same with the Gitrog monster when we sacrifice a land. So the Gitrog monster here is an absolute house, giving us both an outlet as well as a payoff in the form of drawing a card. Mina and Den and Zell bounce a land. Unfortunately, we don't have the choice with Zell, but at least it's free and he's quite the beater. Mina and Den giving trample is also very useful, especially with a huge creature like, well, Zell. We can also make the most of the deck's engines with playing lands from your graveyard. Red and Realmbreaker's Emblem, Jarell Genesis Shepherd, and Ancient Green Warden get the job done. It might take a bit of work to get Ren's Emblem since opponents will do their best to prevent you from getting it, but it's still great without it because its static ability lets you tap lands for any color of mana. Jarell also gives value when sacrificing permanents during your turn, pumping a creature equal to its power. This is great to get Hearthhull that extra boost needed to kill opponents faster. Ancient Green Warden is another one of those auto-includes here like the Gitrog monster. Not only can you play lands from the graveyard, but it doubles landfall triggers. Cards like Aftermath Analysis, Splendid Reclamation, Lull of the Sultai, and Lumra, Beloved of the Woods allow us to return all land cards at once from our graveyard to the battlefield. Not only is this amazing recovery, but the amount of landfall triggers you can potentially get is insane, especially if you sacrifice all your lands in response to these effects on the stack. For example, you can cast Spaceship and then hold priority in order to activate Aftermath Analyst. You can sacrifice all of your lands to escape shift, get that many from your library straight to the battlefield, and then the Analyst ability will resolve from the stack, getting you back all those lands as well as any others in your graveyard. This sorcery is absolutely busted in this deck when played appropriately. Same with Reprocess. You can cast this, sacrifice all your lands for value, and draw that many cards. If you had enough mana, you can then cast this, leave enough mana open to cast Lull of the Sultai or Splendid Reclamation afterwards. There are just so many ways to make the most of these spells and effects. These types of complex decks are my favorite because it's so rewarding when you pay attention and play things properly. You can even just sacrifice all your lands thanks to Sylvan Safekeeper in response to a massive land recovery effect to gain a ton of value. And even then, this card is amazing on its own to protect any key creature for free at instant speed, especially our commander. The problem with Spacecraft is that they lose their charge counters, so not only do you have to recast them with commander attacks, but you then have to station them all over again. Protecting them is key. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Mithril Coat obviously do the trick. Granted, Sylvan Safekeeper is the GOAT in this deck, but you can't go wrong with the classics. Plaza of Heroes is included for the same reason, but unfortunately doesn't synergize with the deck because you need to exile it as part of the cost instead of sacrificing it. Honestly, with how high that activation cost is, this didn't need that nerf, but I digress. Going back to recycling lands, you can also include Strip Mine and Wasteland since you can get these back so easily and multiple times in a turn with extra land effects and playing them from your graveyard. Simply running them isn't enough to make your deck a higher bracket, but replaying these multiple times in a turn to leave your opponents without lands goes against the spirit of bracket 2, so in that case you'd still have to evaluate your deck by more than just its contents. Intent is the key factor to consider above all anyways. Dust Bowl and Army Ants are more sacrifice outlets but require tapping, so you can't make the most of them per turn. Therefore, they are fairer than the previously mentioned land destroying lands, especially since you still have to destroy lands like Rogue's Passage, Cavern of Souls, Maze of Ith, Avendo, etc. Now that we saw how to not only have a revolving door of lands, but also putting in massive amounts of lands at a time, how do we make the most of it? Well, since sacrificing is a big part of it, apart from the Gitrog monster, the deck is also running Korvold, Fate-Cursed King. While Korvold doesn't just trigger on lands but any permanent, it'll mostly trigger off of lands in the deck. It also becomes massive if we're sacrificing a lot of lands at once too. So it's more than just card advantage here. Tireless Tracker and Nissa Vital Forces Emblem also draws lands but via landfall instead of lands going to the graveyard from the battlefield. Unlike Ren and Realmbreaker, Nissa's Emblem is very easy to achieve if you're able to protect her for just a single turn around the table. The Tracker provides card advantage via clues, which require a bit of work to get that card, but hey, at least cracking clues will also trigger Korvold if you also controlled him. Mazrak Crawl Death Priest also triggers off of any permanent getting sacrificed, whether it's yours or not, making it even better here. Putting a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures by cracking a clue or activating a fetch land goes a long way here, and just like Korvold, it flies, making it an amazing beater. Sorcerer Secundi World Altar can then make the most of those massive creatures to draw us into a massive amount of cards, all without taking up a slot in the deck. Sure, you have to station it for the max first, but it doesn't take up a slot in the deck, which is a huge benefit. Plus, it's a land. You'll get land sacrifice triggers and landfall triggers from it. Reliquary Tower is included for the same reason. It doesn't take up a slot on the deck and lets us keep that massive hand once we have our engines going. There's really no reason not to run it here. Going back to the landfall triggers, Farseek, Nature's Lure, 3 visits into the north, and Rampant Growth help us get there for just playing them. These cards are already amazing on their own, but with a deck that cares about lands, these are not just win more in the middle to late game, but are actually useful. So not only do we want them early to accelerate our game, but they're not dead draws later on. Even if Ziatora's Proving Ground is the only multi-typed land in the deck, they're absolutely amazing here, as they are in every multicolored green deck. Tireless Provisioner further accelerates our mana via treasure creation thanks to landfall. Treasures can be especially useful when we want to sacrifice lands for value, but still want to be able to cast our spells. And as we saw earlier, Mazarek and Korvold love things that sacrifice, whether they're landers, clues, or treasures. Subattender, Retreat to Hagra, Tenuk, Memorial Ensign, Tunneling Geopede, and Spitfire Lagak give us redundancy from our commander in terms of painting the table via land synergy. Keep in mind that we need to station Hearthhull to the fullest to get that life loss trigger, but with these, not at all. Even with just one in play, getting a ton of landfall triggers at once will be non-negligible life loss. Imagine controlling multiples of these at once, along with our commander. Amazing. Morog, Fury of Akum also loves getting multiple land triggers at once, especially when we have massive flyers in play. And even then, each attacker gets pumped each time it attacks, giving us a nice win con with little to no effort. Same with Geode Rager. If we're able to play at least 3 lands each turn, whether because we're playing them from the battlefield, playing them, then cracking a fetch land, etc., not only will we be protected from goated creatures, but opponents will be attacking into each other, letting us take over the devastation afterwards. Springheart Natuko, Scoot Swarm, Chocobo Racetrack, Greensleeves Marrow Sorcerer, Rampaging Balos, and Omnath's Locust of Rage give us a potentially overwhelming board thanks to creating creature tokens via landfall. The Natuko is especially amazing. Bestowing it on something like Rampaging Balos or any of the creatures that ping the table via landfall, and we could really get the ball rolling. Scoot Swarm needs no explanation. There's a reason it can crash digital clients like MTGO and Arena. As a bonus, Omnath also hits opponents or creatures whenever elementals we control die. Eudora Grave Gardener helps landfall in an interesting way because it returns our dying creatures as face-down forest. Not only does this trigger landfall, but also gives us more lands for mana acceleration or for sacrifice fodder. This card is absolutely amazing here because creatures die throughout the course of a game, so what better way to make the most of that than turning them into lands. Speaking of turning into lands, Balaget Recovery doesn't take up a slot on the deck since you can play it as a land if you miss your land drop. Best of all, if you did have to play it as a land due to that, you can get it back with a bounce land, Mina and Den, or Zell. I love this spell, especially when getting back cards like Scapeshift or Reprocessed. Elixir and Elixir of Immortality are included just in case we lose too many things, especially to our own mill effects if we use them too much. The Elixir not returning lands might seem like a drawback in other decks, but not this one. We can recover everything else into our library, but still have the lands in our graveyard to continue replaying them. I love it. Last but not least is the deck's interaction. While it's not that easy to have our strategy be interrupted apart from stacks, effects, and the like, hopefully no one Bajuka bogs us, we can still deal with pretty much anything in these colors. There's Demolition Field for land removal, Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within, and Chaos Warp for single target removal, Guthrie Wright's History, Windgrace's Judgment, and Casualties of War for multiple single target removal, Tybalt's Trickery for counter magic with Blasphemous Act and Vandal Blast for board wipes. So we pretty much got all of our bases covered. And Demolition Field is obviously super synergistic here, triggering landfall by replacing itself as well as triggering anything for getting sacrificed. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Hearthhull the Worldseed. While I'm still not enthused about legendary vehicles and legendary spacecraft now retroactively being allowed to be commanders, if that floats your boat, then I guess it's better it exists than it doesn't, especially since it only really affects my commander cube. Now, what would really adversely affect my commander cube is if planeswalkers can then be allowed as commanders. Honestly, if you want that, just play Eternal Brawl, then you can have any planeswalker as your commander. But like I mentioned before, this isn't the video for that discussion. Now, if you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Medic Kirby, and happy brewing.